This is the last module in part 1, and in some ways, the most practical. Risk is a word that gets used constantly in cybersecurity, but rarely defined clearly. This module fixes that. 5 terms: threat, vulnerability, risk, likelihood, and impact, all explained through a single analogy that makes all of them obvious and memorable. And then the counterintuitive insight that most people miss when they first engage seriously with security. The goal is not to eliminate risk, it is to manage it. By the end of this module, you'll have the conceptual toolkit that makes everything in parts 2 through 5 much easier to understand. You make risk decisions every day. You probably made several before you got to this module. You decided whether to carry an umbrella based on whether rain seemed likely and how much it would inconvenience you. You locked your car door before going into a shop. You looked both ways before crossing the road, even on a quiet street. You might have chosen a well-lit route home rather than a shortcut through a dark alley. None of those decisions required a framework or a spreadsheet. They were intuitive assessments of two things: how likely is something bad to happen, and how bad would it be if it did. That is risk thinking. Cybersecurity just applies that same thinking to the digital world. This module gives you the vocabulary to do it clearly, so that when you hear terms like threat, vulnerability, or risk assessment, you are not confused by jargon. You recognize concepts you already understand. 5 terms appear constantly in cybersecurity. They are often used loosely in conversation, but they have precise meanings that matter. Getting them straight makes every future discussion clearer. A threat is something that could cause harm. In the home, heavy rain. In an organization, a phishing email targeting your staff. Personally, a criminal who has bought your leaked credentials. A vulnerability is a weakness that a threat could exploit. In the home, a cracked roof tile. In an organization, no spam filter on your email system. Personally, using the same password on every account. Risk is the combination of threat plus vulnerability. In the home, flooding inside the house. In an organization, a staff member clicking a malicious link because there is no spam filter. Personally, an attacker using your leaked password to log into your bank. Impact is the harm that actually happens if the risk occurs. In the home, water damage to your belongings. In an organization, ransomware deployed, systems locked for a week. Likelihood is how probable it is that the risk occurs. Low, medium, high, based on how common the threat is, how exposed your vulnerability is, and what you have in place to stop it. The most important distinction: threat versus risk. A threat exists whether you do anything about it or not. Rain is a threat to your belongings, whether your roof has a crack or not. A risk is what happens when a threat meets a weakness. If your roof is solid, rain is a threat, but not a significant risk. If your roof has a crack directly above your wardrobe, it is both. This distinction matters because it tells you where to act. You cannot control whether threats exist, but you can control your vulnerabilities. Once you have identified a risk, you need to work out how much attention it deserves. 2 factors determine this: how likely is it to happen, and how bad would it be if it did. High likelihood, high impact. This is the top priority. Phishing attacks targeting your staff are common and can cause serious harm. This combination demands active attention, training, technical controls, and clear procedures. High impact, low likelihood. A fire destroying your office has a low probability, but catastrophic impact. You insure against it and keep fire extinguishers. The cost of preparation is low relative to the cost of being unprepared. High likelihood, low impact. Spam email arrives every day. The impact of any single message is trivial. A spam filter is cheap and worth implementing, but you do not lose sleep over every message. Low likelihood, low impact. A blogger whose website gets a small amount of bot traffic. Real, but manageable. Accept it and move on. A useful mental test for any risk. 2 questions. If this happened tomorrow, how bad would it be? That is impact. How often does this kind of thing happen to organizations like ours? That is likelihood. If both answers are concerning, that risk goes to the top of the list. If one answer is reassuring, the risk is probably manageable. 2 questions. That is the test. Here is something that surprises many people when they first engage seriously with security. The goal is not to eliminate risk. It is to manage risk. Zero risk is impossible. If you want to eliminate the risk of your laptop being stolen, you could lock it in a safe bolted to the floor. But then you cannot use it. If you want to eliminate the risk of your email being hacked, you could delete your email account. But then you cannot communicate. Every security measure involves a trade-off between protection and usability. The question is never, how do we reach zero risk? It is, what level of risk are we willing to accept, and what are we willing to do to get there? This is called risk tolerance, and it varies enormously. A nuclear power plant has an extremely low risk tolerance for anything affecting its safety systems. A small podcast creator has a higher tolerance for the risk of their social media account being briefly compromised. Neither of those positions is wrong. They reflect different contexts, different assets, and different consequences. Understanding your own risk tolerance and being honest about it is the foundation of sensible security decisions. Trying to protect everything equally is a recipe for wasting resources. Protecting the things that matter most, proportionately to how much they matter, is how good security actually works. Once you have identified and assessed a risk, you have 4 options. These responses apply equally at home, at work, and in any organization of any size. Reduce. Take steps to make the risk less likely or less harmful. Install a smoke alarm. Enable MFA on your accounts. Provide phishing training for staff. You are not eliminating the risk. You are making it smaller. Acknowledge the risk exists, but decide it is tolerable given its likelihood, impact, and the cost of reducing it further. No smoke alarm in the garden shed. The value inside does not justify it. Some phishing will always get through. You rely on staff awareness to catch what the filter misses. Transfer. Shift the financial impact to someone else. Home insurance covers fire damage. Cyber insurance covers breach costs. Contractual liability clauses with suppliers shift responsibility for certain risks. You still bear the operational consequence, but not the full financial one. Stop doing the thing that creates the risk entirely. Stop storing petrol in the house. Delete old accounts you no longer use. Don't collect customer data you do not need. In practice, most risk management involves a combination of all 4. You reduce the most likely and most impactful risks. Transfer some financial exposure through insurance. Accept the residual risks that are too minor or too expensive to address. And avoid the riskiest activities where you have a reasonable alternative. One important clarification: accepting a risk is not the same as ignoring it. Risk acceptance is a conscious, documented decision. We have assessed this risk, we understand its likelihood and impact, and we have decided the cost of reducing it further outweighs the benefit. That is legitimate risk management. Ignoring a risk, never assessing it, never discussing it, hoping it goes away, is not. The difference matters when something goes wrong. Everything in parts 2 through 5 of this course is, at heart, a discussion of specific risks and how to manage them. Phishing is a risk. Weak passwords are a vulnerability. Ransomware is a threat. Not having backups is what turns a ransomware attack from a manageable crisis into a catastrophe. The vocabulary you have built in this module will appear constantly. When you encounter a new security concept, try asking, what is the threat this addresses? What vulnerability does it reduce? How does it change the likelihood or impact of a risk? Those three questions will cut through the technical noise and take you straight to what matters. This is also the end of part 1. You have now covered the 3 foundational ideas that underpin every module in this course. Module 1. Your digital assets have real value and most attacks are automated and opportunistic. Module 2. Security protects 3 things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Module 3. Risk is a combination of likelihood and impact, cannot be eliminated entirely, and must be consciously managed. Part 2 begins with Module 4, Phishing and Social Engineering Hacking Humans. It is the most practically useful part of the course for most people, because phishing is the attack you are most likely to encounter in the next 12 months. Alright, before we move on, here are the 3 things from this module I want you to hold on to. Number 1. Risk equals threat times vulnerability times impact. Remove any of those 3 and the risk collapses. Number 2. Risk management is not about eliminating risk. It is about making conscious, documented decisions about which risks you accept and which you address. Number 3. The risk register is a living document. Risks that were low priority last year may be critical today. Now, before we move on, there is one question. A company stores customer passwords in a plain text. An attacker discovers a vulnerability that lets them access that database. Which statement correctly identifies the threat and the vulnerability? The correct answer is D. The attacker is the threat, the external agent trying to cause harm. There are actually 2 vulnerabilities here: the software flaw that allowed access and the plain text password storage that made the breach so damaging. The most important vulnerability is the plain text storage, because even if the software flaw is patched, every password is still exposed. You should fix both. Next up, Module 4, Phishing and Social Engineering. See you there.